The text chimed while I was reviewing patient files at the hospital. A photo popped up on my screen. My stepsister Amanda in a designer wedding dress that I instantly recognized. It was the same style my mom and I had once admired in a bridal magazine years ago, before her illness took her from me. Doesn't she look perfect? Read the caption from my stepmother Diana. Your mother's savings pay for the most beautiful wedding. Everything Amanda deserves. My hands didn't shake as I stared at the screen. My voice remained steady as I finished my rounds and checked on my patients. The only sign that my world had just been shattered was the slight tightening around my eyes. My name is Olivia Chin, and at 29, I'd just discovered my stepmother had stolen my mother's life savings. Money that was supposed to be protected by an ironclad will. But while Diana was probably gloating over her supposed victory, imagining me in tears at my nurse's station, I felt an odd sense of calm. Because there was one crucial detail she'd overlooked. I remember the day Mom had called me into her study, just 2 months before the cancer finally took her. She was already still frail, but her mind was sharp as ever. "Olivia, sweetheart," she'd said, patting the seat beside her desk. "We need to talk about what happens after." "Mom, please." I protested, but she shook her head. "No arguments. I need you to understand something important about the will, about your father." The memory faded as my phone buzzed again. Another photo. Amanda beaming beside an ice sculpture that probably cost more than 3 months of my salary. "The reception is like a fairy tale," Diana wrote, "though I suppose you wouldn't know, being too busy with your noble nursing career to attend." I could picture Diana's smug smile as she sent these messages, could imagine her sitting in her designer outfit at the head table of Amanda's reception, basking in the admiration of guests who had no idea where the money really came from. My dad was probably there too, letting himself be convinced that this was what Mom would have wanted. But Mom had known exactly what she'd wanted, and more importantly, she'd known exactly what Diana was capable of. I dialed my lawyer's number as soon as my shift ended. Not the family lawyer. Diana had made sure he was firmly in her pocket years ago. No, I called Marcus Thorne, the attorney Mom had secretly hired during her final months. "It's time," I said when he answered. Diana used Mom's savings for Amanda's wedding. She finally did exactly what Mom predicted she would. There was a pause, then Marcus' steady voice replied, "I'll file the papers first thing tomorrow." "Are you sure you want to do this? Once we start, there's no going back." Was I sure? I thought about the last 8 years since Mom died, about Diana's constant undermining, her not-so-subtle digs about my career choice, her systematic campaign to turn my father against me, about how she convinced him that my decision to become a nurse instead of joining his medical practice was a betrayal of Mom's memory, rather than the fulfillment of Mom's belief that healing wasn't just about prestigious titles and expensive procedures. "I'm sure," I said firmly. Mom knew this day would come. That's why she prepared for it. After hanging up, I sat in my car in the hospital parking lot, letting the events of the past 8 years wash over me. Diana had entered our lives like a whirlwind just a year after Mom died, when Dad was still lost in his grief. She'd seemed still perfect at first, a sophisticated pharmaceutical sales rep who understood the medical world Dad lived in, who came with a daughter just a few years younger than me. "We'll be a family again," Dad had said at their wedding, squeezing my hand as if trying to convince himself as much as me. I was 22 then, just starting nursing school, trying to honor Mom's memory by following my heart instead of Dad's expectations. Diana's true nature emerged slowly but steadily. First came the subtle comments about how some people weren't cut out for the pressures of being a real doctor, then the constant comparisons between me and Amanda, how she was pursuing a proper medical degree, how she understood the importance of upholding the family's reputation. The final straw had been 3 years ago, when Diana convinced Dad to remove me from my position at his private practice, the job I'd taken despite my reservations, trying to maintain some connection with him. "It's for the best," she'd said with fake sympathy. The other doctors were complaining about having a mere nurse in such a prominent role. "It was embarrassing for your father." I transferred to the hospital after that, throwing myself into emergency medicine where I knew I could make a real difference. But the distance between Dad and me had grown wider with each passing year, carefully cultivated by Diana's manipulations. My phone buzzed again, another wedding photo. This time it was Dad giving a toast, his eyes suspiciously bright, the caption read, "Such a touching speech about his real daughter." That was Diana's favorite weapon, the constant reminder that I wasn't really part of their family anymore. That Amanda was the daughter Dad deserved, following in his footsteps while I chose a lesser path. What Diana didn't know was that Mom had seen this coming. In those final months, as the cancer ate away at her body, but left her mind razor-sharp, she prepared for exactly this scenario. "Your father is a brilliant doctor," she told me during one of our last conversations. "But he's always been naive about people's intentions. Diana will try to take everything, not just the money, but your place in his heart. She'll wait until she thinks she's won, until she's so confident that she gets careless. That's when you'll need to be ready." I pulled out the sealed envelope Mom had given me that day, the one I'd kept safe all these years, waiting for exactly this moment. Inside was a letter, its contents seared into my memory, even though I'd only read it once. "My dearest Olivia, if you're reading this, it means Diana has finally shown her true colors. The savings account she thinks contains my entire estate is actually only a small portion of what I've set aside for you. The real inheritance, everything I built during my years running the hospital's nursing program, is held in a trust that only activates under specific conditions." I touched the paper gently, feeling closer to Mom than I had in years. She'd built her career from nothing, working her way up from staff nurse to director of nursing education at one of the country's top hospitals. Dad had never quite understood why she'd chosen to stay in nursing rather than pursue a medical degree, just as he'd never quite understood my similar choice. But Mom had understood something fundamental about both healing and human nature. She'd known that Diana would eventually overplay her hand, too confident in her own cleverness to imagine she might be outsmarted by a woman she dismissed as just a nurse. I started my car, heading not home but to the small coffee shop where I was meeting Marcus. It was time to put Mom's plan into action. Diana thought she'd scored the ultimate victory using Mom's money to fund her daughter's fairy tale wedding. She had no idea she'd just triggered exactly the scenario Mom had planned for. The coffee shop was quiet at this hour, most of the after-work crowd already gone. Marcus was waiting in a corner booth, a thick folder on the table in front of him. He stood as I approached, his expression sympathetic but determined. "I pulled all the documentation," he said as I sat down. "Everything's in order, just as your mother arranged it. Would you like to review it before we proceed?" I nodded, accepting the folder with steady hands. Inside was the evidence of Mom's true legacy, not just the savings Diana had stolen, but the entire network of investments, properties, and educational endowments she'd built over decades of careful planning. "Diana accessed the savings account last month," Marcus said, pointing to a bank statement. "Withdrew everything to pay for the wedding. She forged your father's signature on the transfer documents, not that he would have stopped her if she'd asked. And that triggers the trust conditions." Marcus nodded. "Any unauthorized access to the decoy account automatically activates the main trust. Your mother was very specific about this. She wanted to give Diana enough rope to hang herself, so to speak." I thought about Diana's smug messages, her certainty that she'd finally proven her daughter's superiority over me. What happens next? "First, we file these papers with the probate court," Marcus explained, pulling out another document. "This evidence shows that Diana not only accessed the account fraudulently, but also violated the specific terms of your mother's will regarding the use of those funds. That triggers a review of all estate matters, including the existence of the primary trust." "And Dad?" Marcus's expression softened. "Your mother provided for that too. There's a letter for him, explaining everything." She hoped that seeing Diana's true colors would finally open his eyes. I stared into my untouched coffee, watching the steam rise and dissipate. Part of me wished there was another way, that we could resolve this without shattering what remained of my family. But Diana had made her choice, and in doing so, she'd proven Mom right about everything. "Do it," I said firmly. "File the papers." It's time Diana learned that being just a nurse doesn't mean being naive. As I left the coffee shop, my phone buzzed one final time. Another message from Diana, this one showing Amanda cutting the massive wedding cake. Perfect end to a perfect day. Your mother's money well spent. I smiled slightly, thinking of Mom's voice. Sometimes, sweetheart, the best revenge isn't about getting even. It's about being patient enough to let someone's own actions reveal their true nature. Diana had no idea, but her perfect day was about to become the beginning of her biggest nightmare. The first sign that something was wrong came 3 days after Amanda's wedding. I was finishing another night shift when a familiar black sedan pulled into the hospital parking lot. Dad stepped out, looking older and more tired than I'd ever seen him. Olivielli called out, his voice carrying across the nearly empty lot. We need to talk. I knew this moment would come, but seeing him there, still in his suit from the office, his hair disheveled like he'd been running his hands through it in frustration, made my heart ache. I'm just getting off shift, I said evenly. There's a coffee shop around the corner. He nodded, falling into step beside me. We walked in silence, the early morning air crisp and cool. It reminded me of the mornings Mom used to walk me to school, pointing out the changing seasons in the trees lining our street. The coffee shop was just opening, the smell of fresh pastries and brewing coffee filling the air. We found a quiet table in the corner, away from the handful of early customers. Marcus Thorne came to my office yesterday, Dad said finally, staring into his untouched coffee. He showed me some documents about Mom's will, about what Deanna did. I waited, letting the silence stretch between us. This was his moment to process, to face the truth he'd been avoiding for 8 years. Did you know, he asked, finally looking up at me, about the trust about Mom's real plans? Yes, I said softly. She told me before she died. She knew Deanna would eventually try something like this. His face crumpled slightly. Why didn't you tell me? Would you have believed me? I countered gently, over Deanna, over her explanations about how I was just jealous, how I couldn't accept my new family. He flinched and I knew I hit home. How many times had Deanna whispered those exact words in his ear, positioning herself as the reasonable one while painting me as the bitter, resentful daughter? The money she took, he said, his voice rough, for Amanda's wedding. It wasn't just about the amount, was it? I shook my head. Mom left those savings with specific instructions. They were supposed to go to the nursing scholarship fund she started to help other students who chose nursing over medical school. Deanna knew that. She just didn't care. She told me it was what your mother would have wanted, Dad whispered. That making Amanda happy would have made her happy. Mom never even met Amanda, I reminded him. But she met Deanna during her last months. She saw exactly who she was. I pulled out my own copy of Mom's letter to Dad. The one Marcus would have shown him yesterday. The pages were crisp, untouched until now. She wrote this for you. She knew you'd need to understand why she did things this way. His hands trembled slightly as he took the envelope. I watched as he read, seeing the emotions play across his face. Shock, grief, dawning understanding, and finally, a deep, burning shame. I've been such a fool, he said, setting the letter down carefully. All these years, Deanna was, and I just let her. It's not entirely your fault, I said, though part of me wanted to agree with him. She's very good at what she does. That's why Mom had to be better. Just then, my phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. Deanna just received the court notice. Brace yourself. As if on cue, Dad's phone started ringing. Deanna's name flashed on the screen. He stared at it for a moment, then deliberately pressed decline. She's been served with papers, I explained. The trust activation triggers an automatic review of all estate matters, including her fraudulent access of the savings account. What happens now? Now, I said, pulling out the folder Marcus had given me, we show her exactly what Mom built and what she stands to lose. The next few hours were a blur of explanations and revelations. I showed Dad the full extent of Mom's estate, not just the savings Deanna had stolen, but the properties, investments, and educational trusts she'd established. The Nursing Scholarship Fund was just the beginning. There were research grants, mentorship programs, even a small medical technology startup she'd invested in during her final years. She built all this, Dad said wonderingly, while running the nursing program, while raising you, while supporting my career. Mom understood something Deanna never will, I replied. True strength isn't about tearing others down to lift yourself up. It's about building something lasting, something that helps others rise. As we talked, Deanna's calls became more frantic. Text messages flooded both our phones. What is this legal nonsense? You ungrateful brat. How dare you? Answer me, both of you. Finally, one message caught my attention. Amanda's in tears. Is this what you wanted? To ruin her perfect day? I showed the message to Dad. This is exactly what Deanna does, I said quietly. She uses Amanda as a shield, makes everything about protecting her daughter while destroying yours. Dad's expression hardened. Not anymore, he said, pulling out his own phone. He typed quickly, then showed me his response. Deanna, enough. I've seen the evidence. We'll discuss this with our lawyers present. Until then, do not contact Olivia again. The silence that followed was deafening. We spent the next hour going through Mom's letter in detail. She'd explained everything. How she'd recognized Deanna's type from their first meeting. How she'd watched her work to isolate Dad from his colleagues and friends. How she'd known Deanna would eventually try to use Mom's own money as a weapon against me. Your father sees the best in everyone, Mom had written. It's one of the things I love most about him. But sometimes that blindness to others' faults can cause real harm. I'm trusting you, Olivia, to be strong enough to show him the truth when the time comes. As the morning sun climbed higher, casting long shadows across our table, Dad finally asked the question I'd been waiting for. What do you need me to do? First, I said, we need to protect what's left of Mom's legacy. Marcus has already frozen the accounts Deanna hasn't touched, but there's more. The trust activation doesn't just expose her fraud, it triggers a complete audit of how she's been managing your finances too. Dad's face fell. She's had complete control of everything since we married. I never questioned. I know, I said gently. That's why Mom made sure I have help when this happened. Marcus isn't just my lawyer, he's got a team of forensic accountants ready to go through everything. And Amanda, her wedding. The money Deanna stole will have to be repaid, I said firmly. Not to me, to the nursing scholarship fund where it was supposed to go. Whether Amanda helps repay it is up to her. Dad nodded slowly, then reached across the table to take my hand. I'm so sorry, Olivia. For everything. Your mother, she would be so proud of you. I squeezed his hand, feeling the weight of years of distance and misunderstanding between us. She was proud of both of us, Dad. That's why she worked so hard to protect us, even from ourselves. As we left the coffee shop, stepping into the bright morning light, my phone buzzed one final time. A message from Amanda. I didn't know. About the money, about what it was meant for. Can we talk? I showed the message to Dad. What do you think? He smiled sadly. I think your mother was right about everything, including the fact that sometimes people can surprise you, if you give them the chance. I typed a quick reply to Amanda. Coffee tomorrow. Just us. Her response came immediately. Thank you. Looking up at the hospital where I'd built my own career, where Mom had created her legacy, I felt a sense of peace settling over me. Deanna had thought stealing Mom's money for Amanda's wedding was her ultimate victory. Instead, it had become the key to unlocking everything Mom had built to protect us. Sometimes the best victories aren't about winning. They're about revealing the truth that was there all along. The cafe where I agreed to meet Amanda was nothing like the upscale places Deanna preferred. It was a small, family-owned spot near the hospital where I often stopped for coffee between shifts. When I arrived, Amanda was already there, looking out of place in her designer clothes. I wasn't sure you'd come, she said as I sat down. The confidence I'd always associated with her was gone, replaced by something more fragile. Mom's letter mentioned you too. I replied, studying her face. She thought you might be as much a victim of Deanna's manipulation as anyone else. Amanda's eyes widened. Your mom wrote about me, but she never met me. She was good at reading people, even from a distance. She saw how Deanna used you, shaped you into a weapon against me without you even realizing it. Tears welled in Amanda's eyes. "The wedding money," she whispered. "Mom said it was your mother's gift to me, that she would have wanted to give her new daughter the perfect wedding. I should have known it was too good to be true." I pulled out my phone and showed her the nursing scholarship website, the program Mom had intended the money to fund. This is what it was meant for, helping students who choose nursing, who understand that healing isn't just about prestige or profit. Amanda scrolled through the site, reading about past recipients and their stories. These people, they're amazing. And Mom just took this from them. She took the money, I corrected. But she couldn't take the spirit of what Mom built. That's why I'm here, Amanda. Not to blame you, but to offer you a choice. Just then, my phone buzzed with an urgent message from Marcus. "Diana's trying to transfer more assets. We've frozen everything, but she's becoming desperate. Be careful." As if on cue, the cafe door burst open and Diana stormed in, her face twisted with rage. "So this is where you're hiding," she spat, glaring at both of us. "Having a little heart-to-heart with my daughter?" I remained seated, keeping my voice calm. "Hello, Diana. Would you like to join us? We were just discussing Mom's nursing scholarship program." "That money was wasted on your mother's pet project," Diana sneered. "At least I put it to good use, giving Amanda the wedding she deserved." "Mom," Amanda interrupted, her voice shaking. "These scholarships, they help people become nurses, save lives. How could you just take that away?" Diana's expression shifted, the mask of maternal concern sliding into place. "Darling, I did it for you. Everything I've done has been for you." Olivia's mother had more than enough money, money that should have gone to her real family. "I was her real family," I said quietly, "and so was Dad." "You're the one who tried to rewrite history, Diana, but Mom knew you would. That's why she left more than just money, she left truth." I pulled out my tablet and played a video, one Mom had recorded in her final weeks. Diana's face went pale as Mom's voice filled the cafe. "If you're watching this, Diana has finally shown her true colors. I want you to know that I saw through her from the beginning. The way she isolated your father turned him against his colleagues, his friends. The way she used Amanda as a prop in her games. I'm leaving this message, along with proof of every manipulation, every lie, every attempt to steal what I built. Turn that off," Diana hissed, reaching for the tablet. But Amanda caught her arm. "No, Mom, I need to hear this." As Mom's message continued, describing Diana's systematic campaign to take control of not just Dad's wealth, but his entire life, I watched Amanda's face. The shock, the dawning comprehension, the grief as she realized how she'd been used. "The nursing scholarship fund wasn't just about money," Mom's recording continued. "It was about legacy, about choosing to lift others up instead of tearing them down. Diana will never understand that kind of strength. But I hope someday Amanda might." Diana's composure finally cracked. "You think you're so clever with your mother's videos and your legal tricks. But your father will never choose you over me. I've made sure of that." Actually, came Dad's voice from behind us. "I already have." He stood in the doorway, Marcus beside him, both holding folders thick with documents. "The forensic audit is complete," Marcus announced. "We found evidence of systematic financial fraud going back years, not just the scholarship fund, but multiple accounts, properties, even attempts to access Olivia's personal savings." Diana's face went from pale to ashen. "You can't prove anything. It was all legal. I had power of attorney." "Power of attorney doesn't cover fraud," Marcus replied calmly, "or the offshore accounts we found, or the attempts to transfer assets this morning." I turned to Amanda, who sat frozen, tears streaming down her face. "Mom's letter mentioned something else about you," I said gently. "She believed that under different circumstances, we might have been real sisters. That Diana's poison didn't have to define us." Amanda looked up at her mother, then back at me. "The wedding. I want to make it right. The scholarship. Money. I'll pay it back. All of it." "You ungrateful little," Diana started, but Dad cut her off. "Enough, Diana. It's over. The divorce papers are being filed today. The police have enough evidence to press charges. But if you cooperate, return everything you've taken, we might be able to avoid that." Diana's eyes darted around the cafe, looking for escape, for sympathy, for any way to regain control. Finding none, she straightened her spine and tried one last time. Everything I did for love. For our family. No, I said, standing up. Everything you did for yourself. Mom knew that from the beginning. That's why she made sure the truth would come out, not just about the money, but about who you really are. As Dad and Marcus led a defeated Diana out to meet with the lawyers, Amanda remained at the table, staring at her untouched coffee. "What happens now?" she asked quietly. I sat back down across from her. "That depends on you." Mom believed in second chances, in the power of people to choose a better path. The scholarship fund needs a new administrator, someone who understands both the medical world and the importance of giving back. Amanda looked up, hope flickering in her eyes. "You trust me with that? After everything?" "Mom would," I replied simply. "And I think it's time I started trusting her judgment about everything else too." 6 months after Amanda's wedding, I stood in front of a room full of aspiring nurses. The scholarship presentation ceremony was being held in the hospital's main conference room, renamed the Catherine Mitchell Memorial Hall in honor of my mother. Today, I began, looking out at the eager faces. We're not just awarding scholarships. We're celebrating a legacy of healing, of choosing to lift others up rather than tear them down. In the front row, Amanda sat beside Dad, both of them smiling. The past months had transformed them both. Dad had thrown himself into rebuilding not just his relationship with me, but his connections with old colleagues and friends. Amanda had surprised everyone by enrolling in nursing school herself, determined to understand the path she'd once dismissed. Diana's absence was a quiet relief. The legal proceedings had ended in a plea deal. No jail time, but full restitution of everything she'd taken, plus a permanent ban from any involvement in medical or charitable organizations. Last we heard, she'd moved to Arizona, her carefully constructed facade of sophistication crumbling in the wake of her exposure. My mother believed that true healing comes in many forms. I continued, touching a locket I wore, the one containing Mom's photo. Sometimes it's through medicine, sometimes through compassion, and sometimes through the simple act of standing up for what's right. The first scholarship recipient approached the podium, a young woman who'd worked as a hospital janitor while putting herself through pre-nursing courses. As I handed her the certificate, I saw Mom's vision coming to life. This was what the money was meant for, not extravagant weddings or power plays, but creating opportunities for those who understood the true meaning of care. After the ceremony, Dad pulled me aside. "I found something in the old study," he said, holding out a worn envelope. It was hidden behind Mom's nursing diploma. Inside was another letter, this one dated just days before she died. "My dearest Olivia, if you're reading this, then everything has played out as I feared it might. Diana's true nature has been revealed, and you've had to be stronger than any daughter should need to be. But I hope you've also discovered something else. That strength isn't just about protecting yourself. It's about creating space for others to grow, to heal, to become better versions of themselves. I've watched you choose nursing not because it was easy, but because you saw what I saw, that sometimes the quietest voices have the most important things to say. That healing isn't just about procedures and prescriptions, but about being present in someone's darkest moments. Take care of your father, and leave time to forgive himself. And keep an eye on Amanda. She's more like you than either of you know. Diana's influence runs deep, but it doesn't have to be permanent. Most importantly, remember that I built all of this, the trusts, the scholarships, the safeguards. Not because I didn't trust you to handle things on your own, but because I wanted you to know that you were never alone. That, even after I was gone, I would find a way to help you fight the battles that needed fighting. Your father once asked me why I stayed in nursing when I could have become a doctor. The answer was simple. Because sometimes the most important healing happens in the quiet moments, in the small kindnesses, in the choice to build rather than destroy. You understood that instinctively. That's why I knew you were the right person to carry on this legacy. All my love, Mom. I wiped tears from my eyes as I finished reading. Dad wrapped an arm around my shoulders, his own eyes glistening. She saw everything so clearly, he said softly. even things we couldn't see ourselves. Across the room, Amanda was chatting with the scholarship recipients. Her entire demeanor transformed from the privileged daughter Diana had raised as someone genuinely interested in others' stories. The trust fund is fully restored, Dad continued. Diana's restitution covered everything, plus the legal fees. But it's the other changes that matter more. He was right. The money had never been the real issue. It was about the choices we make, the legacies we build, the healing we choose to pursue. My phone buzzed. A message from a hospital. One of my patients, a young girl recovering from surgery, was asking for me. This was what Mom had understood. What Diana never could. That true wealth isn't measured in bank accounts or grand gestures, but in the ability to be there when someone needs you. I have to go, I told Dad, tucking Mom's letter carefully into my pocket. Patient needs me. He smiled, understanding completely. Your mother would be so proud, he said. Not just of what you protected, but of what you're building now. As I walked through the hospital halls, I felt Mom's presence stronger than ever. She'd known that Diana would eventually overreach, that her hunger for control would be her undoing. But she'd also known that the aftermath would create space for new growth, new understanding, new kinds of healing. Amanda caught up with me before I reached the elevator. The night shift supervisor asked if I could shadow you sometime, she said hesitantly, to understand what floor nursing is really like. I smiled, remembering Mom's words about Amanda being more like me than either of us knew. Come by tomorrow, I said. I'll show you what real healing looks like. The elevator doors opened and I stepped in, touching my locket one last time. Diana had thought stealing Mom's money for a wedding was her greatest triumph. Instead, it had become the key to unlocking something far more valuable. The truth about strength, about family, about what it means to build a legacy that truly lasts. As I headed toward my patient's room, I remembered Mom's final words to me. Sometimes the greatest victory isn't in winning the battle, but in showing others a better way to live. She'd been right about everything. And now, with every life touched by her scholarships, every student who chose nursing over prestige, every moment of healing that happened in these quiet hospital halls, her legacy continued to grow. Not bad for just a nurse.